Oh dear, this is the life up in the hills, looking back over Plopsrike. It's been a tough couple of weeks with first that giant, and then that dragon. Thank you for being my friend. That's no problem, Bernard. You keep buying me grog and I'll keep being your friend. Oh, drat, it's raining again. Let's get back.
Hello, welcome to Miniature Realms. My name's Stuart. A quick one today. Let's paint some hills. Miniature Realms is proudly sponsored by Baron of Dice, premium wargaming dice. Over 500 styles, over 4,000 customer reviews. Welcome to the best dice on the planet. Now, I know not everyone is a fan of these plastic hills. I think they're great. I think they work really, really well, and they're super, super strong. And bizarrely, only £26 recommended retail price direct from Games Workshop, which is insane. Primed black, that's all you need to do. They don't need to assemble them out of the box or anything like that. And I'm starting with model colour wood grain. It's quite a translucent paint, this, but I quite like the way it goes over black. Now, if you don't have an airbrush, just use a brown rattle can. If you're able to do black first and do a little bit of a Zenithal style dusting to leave a little bit of that black shadow in, great, go for it, do it, because it really will help you. I'm using an airbrush because I've got one and I love it, and I can do a better job using it. It doesn't mean to say that you see an airbrush come straight out here and that's it, you switch off. There will be things that you can follow and copy yourself if you wish to in this video. So I'm giving it a bit of a thin coat, allowing lots of that black to show through. Really, we're going to put lots of mud effect, we're going to put lots of flock and things on this, so it doesn't matter too much. And when this dries, the brown will show up more than it looks now. It does look quite wet. It always comes out of the airbrush very wet, and it's not to do with the airbrush setup. This paint is just a little bit weird. Now, I've also got some of the Citadel wood bases. These haven't been re-released at this stage. Whether they are or not later on, I'm not sure. All of the artwork and things tend to show railway style trees, which I really like, and I've got lots of, but I'm actually using these bases for those, so it will pop up once in a while in this video. But as you can see there, that's the brown dry, slightly glossy, but it doesn't matter. And now we're going in with some more model colour, and this is chocolate brown. It's just ever so slightly lighter, and I'm just going back over the brown and just giving it a subtle highlight for any bits that do show through the flock and things later on. It just gives a little bit more of a sort of a tonal texture and an uplift and blends that black down a bit more. And yes, you've guessed it, I continue the same colours onto that wood base. Now for the rock, this is Wizard Grey and Carcharodon Grey, two thin coats range, just the lighter two parts of a three-part triad here. So the darker grey first, very light here. I'm trying to do a fairly thin layer at an angle as well, so I'm leaving some of the black in just to give a bit of natural shadow really. So going on first, focusing on the rock that's mostly around the sort of the flat sides of that upper hill, but there's also a few little patches around the base as well, a few little sort of areas of stones and things. Now, I'm not worried about the overspray here at all. It will overspray a little bit, especially on those little patches of rock that within the brown. It doesn't matter because we're going to use some oil washes and things, and it will tie it all in together later on. And you've guessed it, it works just the same on this wood base here, and it's just a way of showing you how you can go around doing sort of bulk painting terrain really, especially if you've got armies to get painted and you just want to get these things done. This whole scheme really, this whole process is a quick way of getting them on the table, but they still look pretty good and striking. So back to the hills now, and we have that lighter grey, the Carcharodon grey, and it really just gives a highlight to that other grey. So I'm focusing here just where the light would hit, so the tops of the edges of the rock face as it pokes out a little bit more, and then when there's angles that go down to the side, just following the brush down with them a little bit there. So you've got both levels of grey showing and a bit of the black showing through as well. Before you know it, you've got quite a striking rock look already. And here we are back to that little wood base again there, just focusing on the edges of some of those rocks that are pointing up a little bit more, making them pop, making them stand out. This is model colour again and white grey, one of my sort of all-round go-to whites, and it's a bit of dry brushing time here. Focusing to start with around the rock areas, just lightly dusting it over, picking up the detail rather than anything else. But very soon I just spread that out over the whole miniature. What you don't want to do is make the brown grey, so you've got to be really light and subtle, but I'm just really just picking up that detail a little bit. So where I do add some oil washes, that shows through. If there's any gaps in the flock areas and the mud areas, it doesn't look like just flat paint and adds a little bit of texture to it. And guess what again? Yeah, it works exactly the same on the wood base. Now, as I'm squeezing in the wood base into this quick hill tutorial, I'll just show you how I do the tree stumps and things like that. Because we just dry brushed over the top, we've got that kind of underpainting a la slap chop style thing. So I'm just using some Garagax sewer on here. You could use any of the brown, the darker brown or mid brown contrast style paints to do this job. Really just do it to choice. I'm going for this sort of darker mid-tone brown and just painting it straight over the top. The detail shows through where you've dry brushed, so you've got a nice little highlight on there, and that's all you need. It's going to be covered with flock and mud and trees most of the time, so they really won't show up. Now I am going back to the airbrush. This is Contrast Wildwood. I'm adding this to the cup with about 20% water in there just to help it flow. And I am reinforcing the shadows now. Now, if you're not using an airbrush, you won't be able to do this stage. You could do it by hand. You can paint them in, but I'd probably skip it altogether because the oil washes, which I would recommend doing if you're going to do one or the other, will be a lot easier and do a similar job. I'm going to be doing both here. If you don't want to use oils, you could just paint this in with a heavy brush instead of the oils, and you'll see that stage next anyway. But I like the control this gives me. I like the way that it feathers out, reinforces those shadows. You can be quite detailed here. As you can see, I'm just going around individual stones a little bit there, blending in where the overspray of the whitish looking grey there has bled out onto the brown areas, and it really just sort of ties it all in and adds those shadows back and makes it look pretty cool. Really tidies up around the rocks on the wood base in exactly the same way, and I'm not worried if it overspills a little bit onto the rocks either, because it just looks like mud encroaching onto the rocks. And again, I'm just going back around. And it looks really dark when it first go on, but when it dries, it's really, really matte, so you end up with this nice overall finish. And that's the look, really. You can see it's dried down fairly matte already. That's a pretty good looking hill. You could have an earth looking hill. Now I'm going to use some ready mixed oil wash. You can mix your own. This is a dark mud, so it's a deep brown colour. And I'm just using an old brush and just putting it into all of the recesses and all around the rocks. So this will shade the same way as an Agrax earth shade would or something like that. But the difference with the oil wash is it really wants to run into those recesses and not stick on the flat surfaces. So it means you don't get those sort of pooling and the tide marking that you get with a standard wash. The other thing you can do with them is clean it away afterwards. It takes a lot longer to dry, so you can move it around with your brush a lot more. You can use clean artist's white spirit and clean it off the flat surfaces if you get it anywhere that you didn't want to. Maybe it's on the top of a big rock that you want to leave nice and clean, but I just really like the way it works. You can see it looks pretty dark there. Again, that will dull a little bit once it dries, and it will go super matte as well and really look like ingrained dirt and dust, which is just what we're after. And just as I did before, I'm carrying this over onto the wood base as well, just to go back in where that wildwood airbrush stage was added. And as I said, if you don't have an airbrush, you could really achieve a lot just by picking up a little pot of this stuff. I know Element Games sell it. I'm sure other places do as well, but I normally get mine from Element Games, an old brush, and just play around with it. If it's the first time using oils, you can't do a lot of damage on a piece of terrain. So really good time to sort of get used to it and play around with it and see what it can do. Sticking with those oils on the same range, this is green moss. This is quite bright and vibrant, but what I'm doing here is I'm putting it on the rock faces, but wet blending it, because that oil stays wet for a while, so wet blending it into the brown that's already there, and you get this really, really nice effect. So just a little bit like lichen or moss, funnily enough, with a name like that, and you can just blend it in, sort of almost dry brush it in at stages and play around with it, and when it dries, again, it will just slightly tint those areas and just give a little bit of colour difference and a little bit of variation. And just as with all those other stages, you can use the same effect on that wood base there as well. Now on to the more predictable stages. If you saw the pictures at the beginning of the finished miniature, I've used a lot of flock on these. I'm just using some thinned PVA glue. It's worth using a decent quality PVA glue. If you use something that's too cheap, so you don't want to pick anything up in pound shop or something like that. At least get some good quality score PVA, or even something like Gorilla Glue PVA. It really holds a lot more stuff on. It's as simple as that, really. It's less likely to peel off and flake away afterwards, meaning that your flock is going to end up on the carpet or floor, whatever it happens to be, a lot less. You can spray on a thin down coat of it afterwards to really seal it in as well, which I don't do on camera here, but I will definitely do afterwards. Adding it to the wood base as well. Try not to get it on the rocks. What I do afterwards off camera is go back and actually put a thin layer in the sockets where the trees will plug in, so when the trees are removed it doesn't stand out as these dark circles quite as much. For some final touches, I'm using some Vallejo Diorama FX. This is European mud, so this is a wet mud effect. I'm just splodging this on in random patterns in places. Just a lot. The grass has been trodden on a lot and a bit wet. The flock is still wet on the miniature at the moment. I'm doing that deliberately because when I add this now, it will move the flock slightly out of the way. And when you sort of step on grass and it gets muddy and filled with waterlogged, you tend to not see the grass underneath it, and that's the effect you're getting from this. And as with all the stages before, I'm doing exactly the same thing on this little wood base here, and you can see here the flock is in those little sockets for the trees. And that's your finished hill. All dry there. I think it looks pretty good, and exactly what you wanted, and relatively quick. Didn't take very long at all. And then here we have the wood base, and I'll just show you here. So those are actually 48mm across. It's a real pain, but I was able to order some 45mm MDF cut bases from Warbases, and with the flock and things on, which adds a couple of mils to them, they just fit in really nicely. So I just happen to have a couple of these wood bases, and I've got lots of these railway trees, and that's just a really good way of using the plastic style stuff with the more cool, I think, looking trees. So very, very simple. I'm very aware that I have used an airbrush a lot, as I always do, and not everyone watching this will have an airbrush, especially if they see a short tutorial doing these hills. That might not be the way they approach it, but as I said, you can use a rattle can to do black with a dusting of brown over the top afterwards, and then you just paint in the grey, do a bit of dry brushing, and the rest of the techniques you can copy over anyway. So I hope that doesn't put people off. I love airbrushes. I will never ever stand on a soapbox and say that you must own one, because I know that it's just not something that everyone can do. Do not have the time, the money, the space, and all of those things that go with it. But if you thought about it and you do have the time and the money and the space, I really, really can't recommend them enough. They have absolutely transformed my hobby in the many, many years I've been using them for now. Just save so much time, they save money as well, and they make things so much easier and a nicer effect in my opinion. But as I said, there are plenty of things you should be able to take from this tutorial, even if you don't own one.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed the video. I don't know about you, but I'm so happy that these terrain kits have come back, and so many of them, and at generally really, really reasonable prices for Games Workshop standards. I think they're very, very competitive in the wider terrain market, so to speak. So it's good to see such a positive reaction to them. Games Workshop doesn't always get a positive reaction to all of its releases, but I think on the whole, I've seen only good things said about the return of the fortified manor and these hills and so on. And I really hope that we see more in the future. Let me know in the comments below what other kits you'd like to see return. I know there were lots of quite big flamboyant kits around the 8th edition fantasy era, the Skullmain Vance, that kind of stuff. I prefer this stuff a little bit more, but some of those kits I would really, really like to see back as well. And a lot of them, you can leave some of the skulls off so it doesn't look quite so garish. But let me know what you think about that anyway. Maybe not the longest or the most exciting video, and I didn't originally plan to do a tutorial for painting these hills, but I did have quite a few requests, bizarrely enough. So maybe there were enough of you who would like to see the way I approach doing these kind of things. So hopefully there will be some techniques and things that you take away and mix with the way you do your own hobby. I know a lot of you won't be using airbrushes for these. We'll be starting from that rattle can base, and the later stages are absolutely compatible with that as well. Lots more Warhammer the Old World content on the way, hopefully later this week with a special army video for the Warriors of Chaos, if I manage to get it finished and edited on time. I'm putting this out now on camera to really pile the pressure on myself to make sure that it's done. If you do like what you see in the channel, please do subscribe, like this video, comment below, and all those things that really support us. I do have a Patreon, so please check that out. I have affiliate links as well. They're all in the video description below. But thank you very much for watching. Take care. and I'll catch you soon.
Here, there, what's that coming over the hill? Is it a monster? Is it a monster?
No, Bernard. It's a marauding Chaos Warband by the looks of it.
No, no. Will my bad luck never end?